Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Reuven.
Hi, Reuven. Hi. Live show.
All right.
Reuven is on the
He's on Zoom this
now.
morning.
Hi.
Morning, Juice.
Morning, Juice.
Figured pretty soon Just is going to sit in for the Gemara class
Oh,
too.
yeah. He's getting ready.
All right, gentlemen, we've got our learning sponsors. Year of Learning, Friends of Nina Moynester, Nechama Asna Bad Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lezecha Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Halevi. Friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha, Bas Rivka. Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Isser. We have a month of learning by Mark Linder in memory of his mother, Yona Bat Zalman Leib. Rabbi Isaac Schmerler in memory of his wife, Menya Sima Bat Yitzchak Isaac. Friends of Marilyn Schmerler in her memory, Menya Sima Bat Yitzchak Isaac. Gary and Marcia Schrager in memory of his father, David Ben Yosef, and his mother, Freda Bas Hendel. Marcia Federbush in memory of her husband, Oriel Pinchas Ben Harav Shimon. We have a week of learning by Shelley and Oscar Moll in memory of her father, Shlomo Ruvain Ben Binyamin. Okay, today is the 12th of August. So we have the following. We have a day of learning plus Torah fund by Marvin and Shirley Weinstein in memory of his mother, Fega Bat Israel Halevi. We also have the following from the 6th of the month. Okay, there was a day of learning by Shlomo and Fegi Kleinbart in memory of his mother, Gittel Bat Asher Tzvi. From the other day on Tuesday, right? Today is Friday, right? On Wednesday, there was a Barbara and Rabbi Benjamin Yasker gave a day of learning in memory of her mother, Ita Rezel Bat Aryeh Leib HaKohen. Today also we have a day of learning by Jesse and Sarah Marilis in memory of his mother, Bracha Bat Harav Matisyahu Yehuda. Shamas have an aliyah, crank Rafia Velti Yeshia. We also keep in mind the Refuah Shlema for Peretz Tzemach Ben Yaakov Yitzchak and the young man Moshe Ruvain Ben Sima Tabela, as well as others. Okay, just tomorrow I will announce those for Shabbos and things like that, then we go on. Okay. All right.
You don't have your normal ending?
What? I said, Mein Shema have an aliyah, crank Rafia, Velti Yashir, Hashem Atliya, and L'chol B'nai Israel, a good gebench.
Amen. Oh my.
All right. Okay. Gonna have to teach that to Michael because, or Ruvain, right, Ruvain? Gonna have to learn that so when I'm not gonna be here. Okay. So let's just come back for a moment. We have had this series of Mishnayot and Braitot that have been dealing with this issue of double jeopardy. Let's call it that for the moment. Okay? And along with that topic, we've also been dealing with conceptually the issue of rape regarding certain women and whether there is this knas that is implied depending upon the status of the woman. Okay. And in that discussion, we found various opinions. That's okay. Various opinions, and we came to the bottom, right? Today's daf, I know, is Lamed Zayin, but just go back, Lamed Vav, just a moment, right? To the very bottom there. we saw that this discussion, okay, was such that again we were back to a machloket, and in that machloket, the comment was made, okay, that the view of the rabbis was hapodet hashvuya umeid ba yisena lo shade inish zuze bichdei, okay, that the view of the rabbis, which was different, which was a machloket with the Rebbe Yehuda, okay, was that a person is not going to, so to speak, throw out his money, all right? In other words, have the ketubah and the money in the ketubah if he's not going to be, and be willing to write this and marry this woman, okay, if it's a problem, if he's not going to be able to keep her as his wife, right? Me'id ba kadei lo yisena, right? Shema einav natan ba. Okay, right? So perhaps he had his eye on her, he was thinking in advance, whatever. Okay. So the Gemara then continued with Rami le Rav Papa bar Shmuel, the Rav Yosef. So Rav Papa bar Shmuel, okay, here is asking a question, okay, of Rav Yosef. And that's where we pick up on the top of Lamed Zion. What's his question? V'sava Rabbi Yehuda b'kedushata kaima? Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that a woman who is in the status of a prisoner, a captive, that she remains in this condition, a status of purity? Okay, in other words, she would remain in her, let's say, virgin status, and thus even be able to marry a Kohen. Okay, Vahatanya, right? As we're on the top of Lamed Zion, right? But a Braita teaches the following: Hagioret shenitgaira v'ra'at hadam. Okay, a female convert, right? And she sees blood. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Daya Sha'ata. According to Rabbi Yehuda, okay, his implication is that her time is fixed in a sense. Okay, in other words, what happens, all right, in that situation, only from the moment of conversion does she have to deal with issues of nida and bleeding and things like that. Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and he says, Omer, Harei hi kichol hanashim. She is no different than any other woman, namely, umitam'ah me'et la'et. In other words, she becomes tme'ah within the retroactively for the past 24 hours, okay? And in addition, umipkida lepkida, okay? So within the past 24 hours after her conversion, okay, she becomes tme'ah, and then following that, as a Jewess, she is then me'et la'et, from one time to another, from one period to another. Okay, so the Gemara says, and not only that, but as a Gioret, he tells us, Rabbi Yossi, tzricha lahamtin shlosha chadashim. Okay, she has to wait 3 months. That is what's added by Rabbi Yehuda, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, after she converted, before she can marry, she must wait 3 months because we don't know if she's pregnant. And therefore they would.
What are we saying here?
Okay, that was Rabbi Yehuda's view. Okay, that in other words, she doesn't begin to have to deal with nida, okay, and all of that till after her conversion.
Right, then she goes retroactive 3 months.
No, then Rabbi Yehuda says, but at that point,
She's not counting 3 months.
she then has to wait another 3 months
From the moment she
converted before she can. Okay, so on the one hand, Rabbi Yehuda seems to be lenient regarding her nida situation for the convert. On the other hand, he seems to be very stringent as to when she could be married, because we don't know, theoretically, fine, she could say, well, I don't have a period, but that could be because she's pregnant, not because,
Vice versa, after she converts, like a week later, she has her
could be,
Gaia shot, then you'll have to.
right, okay,
She still has to wait 3 months?
that would be Rabbi Yehuda's view, okay, right. Rabbi Yossi, however, says, matir le'ares v'linaseh miyad. So on the one hand, Rabbi Yossi was strict in terms of her nida situation for the convert, but he was more lenient in regards to when she could be married, right? So that's one of the differences in these statements, okay? So what happens? So Amar Le said to him, so this was, but he noticed, what did they do? They tried to bring a parallel between the status of the Gioret and the status of the Shvuya. And we are asking now, as the Gemara continues, is that really a valid comparison? Gioret Ashvuya Karamit, you're saying that taking the example of a female convert and a female captive, okay, can you really compare these? Are these parallel? Gioret lo mintara nafsha. A convert, a Gentile woman, does not necessarily protect herself. In other words, she does not refrain from sexual activity. Shavuya, but a Jewish woman who has been being held captive, mintara nafsha. She does try to protect herself. Okay.
They're not talking about a convert in the same situation that she's a captive.
Right. They're not talking about that.
Just a plain convert.
Right. Okay. So what happens? The Gemara then continues. Virami shvuya ashviya. So let us make then see if there's a contradiction in the same categories, Zev, right? Between one convert and a female convert. I'm sorry, one female captive and another female captive. The Tanya, because in that situation, a Braita teaches, Hagioret v'hashvuya v'hashifcha, okay, which is our Mishnah, our very Mishnah that started this whole discussion. The convert and the female captive and the female servant, sheniftu, that were redeemed, v'shenit gairu, or converted, v'shenish tachraru, or were freed, yeterot al banot shalosh shanim v'yom echad, so long as they are more than 3 years and a day, tzrichot lahamtin shlosha chodashim. They all have to wait 3 months before they can be married. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the statement of Rabbi Yehuda, that Braita. Okay. What happens? We immediately see, okay, that now we have a contradiction between what Rabbi Yehuda said at the beginning of the Amud and this situation, right? Rabbi Yossi matir le'ares v'linaseh miyad, whereas Rabbi Yossi permits them to become engaged and to marry immediately. Okay, so what happens? Ishtik. Rabbi Yossi is silent at this point. And we see, as I said, that Rabbi Yehuda contradicts himself. Okay, so what happens? Rabbi Yossi now replies back to Rav Papa Bar Shmuel. Okay, and he responds to him as follows, right? Midi shemialach baha. Okay, something that we learned in regard to this Amarle. He said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Sheshet. This is what Rav Sheshet said. Shera'uha shenivala. Okay, that they actually saw her or were clearly aware of the fact that she had relations. Ihachi, if
Is that a Gioris?
that would be the Gioris.
Huh?
All right,
No, not a Gioris,
the Shvuya.
Shvuya.
What? The Shvuya.
The Shvuya. That they saw that this
That the
captive.
woman who was captive did have relations.
Right.
That she was seduced, the captive. Ihachi, mai tamad Rabbi Yossi. If that's the question, says the Gemara, then what about the reasoning of Rabbi Yossi? All right. How can he give his answer? Amar Rava, kasava Rabbi Yossi, isha mizuna mishameshet b'moch, shalo titaber. A woman who is promiscuous utilizes a moch, which was a preventative measure to become pregnant. Okay, right. So that was the birth control method implied. Bishlema gioret. Okay, so the Gemara now comes back and says that's understandable or acceptable in regards to the situation of the potential. I'm going to use the word potential convert here. Why? Kevan da'ata le'igiure mintra nafsha. Because it's her intent to convert, she's going to be careful that if she does have any relations, okay, she is going to use preventative means from becoming pregnant, right? Shvuya, nami. But if it's a captive woman, isn't here also? De lo yada hecha mamtula, right? She doesn't know what her situation is, when they're going to, somebody is going to come and perhaps free her, or she'll be released, right? That could, maybe she also would use preventative methods, okay, in terms of relations. Shifchanami, and maybe the maid servant also might use preventative measures, right? Disham'a mipimara, because maybe she heard from her master that she was soon to be freed, and therefore she would know that once she's free, she becomes a full-fledged Jewess and wants to be, so to speak, appropriate, available, other term we want to use, okay? So there can. Ella yotz'a b'shein ve'ayin, my ikla mema. But if it was a situation of the shifcha, and the reason that she was freed was because of some physical act, okay, that was done to her, okay, according to the Torah, remember, if the slave, right, if the slave had some sort of physical act done to the slave, they must automatically be free, doraita, right? In that case, my ikalamema.
If the master
Right, if
knocks
the
out
master
the master, right?
okay, okay, if that was a situation, she would, or he, either case, the doraita would be free. What are you going to say then? How do you know then that you could argue that that individual also would be using preventative means to become pregnant? V'chitema kol mimela. And if you want to say here, okay, that in this situation, okay, it could be mela, any situation, okay, that that could go on here, right? Lo, maybe that's not the case. Lo amar Rabbi Yossi, all right? Rabbi Yossi would not say the same view. Hare anusa umifuta. Maybe it was a situation of rape, okay, or that she was seduced. The mimela, that in a general situation of women, that could occur. And therefore, none of them might at that moment have the opportunity to use preventative situation. Vitanya, but we also have a Braita. Anusa mufuta, tzrichot lahamtin shlosha chodashim divrei Rebbe Yehuda. That a woman who is raped or seduced must wait 3 months, according to the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi matir liares lina semiyad, whereas Rabbi Yossi says she's permitted to become engaged and to marry immediately. Ela amar Rava, but rather Rava says as follows, giving a different explanation, right? The kasava Rabbi Yossi, that Rabbi Yossi must be of the opinion, Isha mizana mithapechet kadei shelo titabra, that a woman who is promiscuous, after she has relations, turns over. In other words, she changes her position physically so that the semen doesn't remain in her body, okay? That would be the case, so that she wouldn't become pregnant. Ve'idach, and the other one, namely Rabbi Yehuda, Chayshinan Shema Lo Nithapcha Yafe Yafe. Maybe he's suspect that she doesn't turn over properly, okay, to allow for to that happen, right? Now, having said this, we've now come to a new point in the Gemara, okay, where we're trying to say, come back to our discussion earlier of why is it that we said much earlier that our whole discussion of double jeopardy, okay, and when we use the same pasuk, okay, about the punishment given the situation of the pregnant woman who tried to break up the fight and got hurt, and we use that pasuk a number of times. Okay, so what happens? Says the Gemara. Shneimar, it says, "V'lo hiye ason anosh ye'anesh." We use that pasuk. It says so that there be no harm. The citation of that pasuk, but nevertheless, the person who did the striking of the woman must receive some sort of punishment, and we understood that to be a payment, unless he killed the woman, okay, as a result of that situation. Vaha mehacha nafka, but that comes from where, says the Gemara? Mehatam nafka. Maybe we derive it from the following: Kedei rishato, from a pasuk that says his single act of wickedness. Mishum risha achat ata mechayvo. In a situation of a single act of wickedness, we can obligate him. Ve'iyata mechayvo mishum shtei rishaot. But we cannot obligate him if he committed the same act again another time. Chada b'mita umamo. In one situation, okay, we're saying here, right? In that case, right, what would happen? All right, where there was a situation of death and payment. B'chada b'malkot umamo. But in another situation, we talked about the punishment of lashes and money, utsricha. And we need discussions on both those kind of situations, both those scenarios. Why? Says the Gemara, mita umamo. Had I only learned an example where the punishments of double jeopardy was both the death penalty and payment of a fine, mishum de'ika ibud neshama, because there's a situation of loss of life, aval malkot. But in regards to the other scenario, where the punishment of double jeopardy is lashes and money, malkot umamon, deleka ibud neshama, where there is no loss of life, ema lo. I would say therefore no, We don't apply the fact that the greater punishment supersedes. We require both. V'iyashma'inen malkut umamon. And had I only learned the situation of the two punishments being lashes and money, payment, fine, knas, mishum delo chamir isure. Because maybe it wasn't a major prohibition. Okay? Aval mita umamo. But in a situation where the two punishments are death penalty and payment of money, of knas, the chamir isure, where it's a more stringent prohibition, emelo, I would say there no, tzricha, and therefore that's why we need to have both cases spelled out in terms of that whole discussion that we have. Ula Rabbi Meir, and what about then the view of Rabbi Meir? Da'amar lokeh u'mishalem, and the Gemara reminds us that Rabbi Meir, however, did hold that in a double jeopardy situation of lashes and payment of knas, you had to do both. Tarte lamali. Why then does he hold by both of them? Chada b'mita umamon. In one case, if it was both death and payment of the money, right, as we go over to the next Amud, v'chada b'mita umalko. And in one case, it was the death penalty and lashes. Okay, in that situation, if that was our two scenarios, utsricha, and here too we would need a discussion. Why? The iyashma'inin mita umamon. Had I learned it, a scenario where the double penalties were death penalty and payment of money, mishum dechada begufe v'chada b'mamone. I might argue that in one case it applied to his body or to himself, and in another case it applied to his money. Lo avdina, we don't do so. Aval b'mita umalko, but in regards to death penalty and lashes, the ide ve'ide begufe, where both this one and this one apply to his body, ema mita achrichtehi. I might just say it was a prolonged death penalty. You beat him first, and then you kill him. Okay? V'niavad be, and we would do that to him. V'iyashma'inin mita umalkot, the tarte begufe lo avdinan. And if I were to have learned it where we had both mita, death penalty and lashes, that the two of them are applied to his body, we don't do that. Aval mita umamo, but with regards to death penalty and payment of money, dechada begufe v'chada b'mamone, whereas one applies to his body and one applies to his money, emer na'avid. I might say then that we do that. Na'avid be, we do it. Tzricha. Therefore, we need both discussions in that situation. Okay. Now, having learned it from that pasuk, right? That we're saying that based on that pasuk, we're saying, with the exception of Rabbi Meir, okay, when it's a situation of malchus and money, okay, it's one or the other. Everybody right? Now what's going to happen is the Gemara is going to say, hold on a second. We have other psukim that we could have learned the same information. Okay, how then do you interpret those other psukim? And that's what we're going to continue with. Next example, new pasuk. Velo tikchu kofer lenefesh rotzeach, that you do not accept, right, a ransom for the life of a murderer. Okay, Lamali. Why then do I need that pasuk? The Amar Rachmana, because the Torah tells us, Lo tishkol mamona mine v'tip tare mikitla, that you do not accept money from him and exempt him from the death penalty. Okay, so that's one explanation. How about the following? We say, another pasuk, Lo tikchu kofer lanus el ir miklat tau. You do not take I don't want to say a bribe, but you do not take money, a ransom, whatever, to allow him to, and he flees to the city of refuge. Okay, Lamali. What about that pasuk? The Amar Rachmana, that again the Torah says, Lo tishkol mamona mine v'tiftare min galut. Don't take money from him and therefore exempt him from exile. In other words, from having to go to the Ir Mikvah. So the Gemara now questions, Cherei Kra'ai Lamali? Why do I need both psukim then? Okay, couldn't I have learned one from the other? If I had had the pasuk of the Ir Miklat, couldn't I have learned from that maybe a Kal V'chomer and say, oh, if that's the case, certainly in the case of, right, like that. So the Gemara continues and answers, Chad b'shogeg, v'chad b'mezid, u'tzrichi. One is in a situation of shogeg, one in a situation of mezid. U'tzrichi, and we need them. Why? The iyashma'inin mezid, mishum dechamur isurei. If I had learned it simply in regards to a mezid situation, okay, where the prohibition is greater, aval shogeg, okay, but regarding the shogeg, I might have thought, what? Delo chamir isurei, where the prohibition is not so great, and I may have thought then I could pay instead of going into exile. Ema lo, I would say no. V'iyashma'in in shogeg, and had I only learned the situation of shogeg, mishum deleka ibud neshama, because there is no loss of life. Aval mezid, but in the mezid situation, the ika ibud neshama, ema lo, that where there is a loss of life, I would say no, it doesn't apply. Tzricha. Therefore, we need both explanations and both psukim. Okay, let's go on. I'm going to bring another pasuk. It says, V'la eretz lo yichupar ladam asher shofech ba, ki im badam shofcho. Okay, so we have that other, okay, the other pasuk. And no expiation can be made for the land, for the blood that is shed there, but by the blood of him that shed it. What about that pasuk? Lamali. Okay. So maybe we again might think that payment would absolve the person from the death penalty. Okay. We need it for the following braita that teaches us as follows. Minayin she'im nit arfa ha'egla. How do we know? In the situation of Egel Arufa. Okay. Remember, we're all familiar with the Egel Arufa, that the body is found between two cities and you don't know who the murderer is. Okay. And what do? They determine which city is closer. Okay. And then they take an animal and they chop off its head. All right. So Gemara goes on here. But in that situation where they perform the Egel Arufa ceremony and then afterwards discover who the murderer was, right? What do we say? Minayin she'ein potrinoto. How do we know that we don't exempt him? Okay, that we don't, right? What is that? Okay, Shneamar ula aretz lo yichupar ledam asher shofech ba. Okay, there clearly that the land that the blood was shed thereon. Okay. Gomer, etc. Okay. So that satisfies the requirement in that pasuk. Right? Va'ata tiva'er hadam hanaki mikirbecha lamali. So now I bring another pasuk, right? And no expiation can be made for the land, for the blood that is shed therein. Doesn't that seem to be the same thing that we just said? Lamali. Mi bayale likadetanya, again, says the Braita. We had lead it for the following Braita. Minayin lumumatin b'sayef shehu min hatzavar. How do we know that those who are condemned to be to a death penalty by the sword, that it occurs at the neck? Okay. Talmud Lomar, our text tells us, Va'ata tiva'er hadam hanaki mikirbecha, that we say that you, what do you want to say? Put away the blood, the innocent blood, from the midst of you. Hukshu kol shofchei damim le'egla arufa. They made an association between those who shed blood and the egel arufa. The interesting piece now. Okay. Ma lahalan min hatzavar af shofchei damim min hatzavar. The same way that the egel arufa is decapitated, okay? So likewise we do to those, okay, who shed blood from the neck. Now, that would seem to tell us what? That you should take the sword and cut off the back from the head. Okay, it reminds me of what a guillotine does. Okay? However, what's going to happen? Notice the Gemara continues. Malahalan bekofitz. If that then deals with a cleaver, umimul oref, but we say that it's done opposite the neck. Afkan bekufitz umimul oref. So here too, are we going to say that it's going to be done with a cleaver and opposite the neck? In other words, from the back of the head. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Abuha, Amar Kra. Okay, but the Torah tells us in another pasuk, V'ahavta l're'echa kamocha, that you shall love your neighbor, namely, baror lo mitayafa. Choose for him a more respectable death. Okay? Okay. New pasuk. Kol cher. What?
They take the sword and they
cut it from the front. And that's exactly the case. Right? Right? That's, I guess, more respectable. Right? Okay. A new pasuk. Kol cherem asher yecharam min ha'adam lo yifteh. Lamali. Why is that pasuk necessary then? Right? Anything that is set aside, okay, from a person cannot be redeemed. Doesn't that seem to be telling us the same thing, that you can't pay? All right? Mi baya leila kedetanya, says a Braita. We need it as was taught in the following Braita. Minayim liyotze leheareg v'amar echad orcho alai. How do we know that if somebody is being led out to be put to death, and another person shouts out, Echo alai, his value is on me. In other words, the oraita, we know that a person can claim the value of a person, which is set by the Torah based on gender and age, and therefore a person thus is making a vow to give money to the Beis Hamikdash in that situation, based on the value, Torah value of that person's age and gender. Okay? How do we know that if we're a person to do that, minayin shelo amar klum, that basically it's as if he said nothing. Shene'amar, as the pasuk tells us, Kol cherem asher yecharam min ha'adam lo yipadeh. Any cherem here, anything that which was set aside, dedicated, okay, done by a person, that cannot be redeemed. Yachol af kodem, says the Gemara. It could be done, but only earlier. Shed nigmar dino came. Why? Because his case has already been decided. Talmud lomar min ha'adam. That's why the Torah says from a person, velo kol ha'adam, and not the entire person, implying that before the sentencing, you can, okay, render a person, okay, cherem, echo. But after the death sentence has decided, that cannot be done. Ula Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia, and according to Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia, the Amar Na'aroch, who says he disagrees and says, yes, we could do that. Mepnei shedamav kivutzin. Why? Because his blood is gathered. Hi, kol cherem. Okay, this all the item that's dedicated. Ma'i avile. What do we need it for? What do we do with it? Mi bayele lekadetanya. We need it as was taught elsewhere in a Braita. Rabbi Yishmael ben Osho, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer. He says as follows: Lefi shematzinu lemumatim bidei shamayim shenotnim mamon mitkaper lahem. Because we find that those who have been condemned to death, okay, in heaven, in other words, by korate, in this case, shenotnim mamon, if they give tzedakah, right, umitkaper lahem, and then that helps them atone for whatever they would be condemned for. Shene'amar, why? Because it says, im kofer yushat alav. If the ransom is handed to by him. Yachol af bidei adam came. So likewise, it should be similar with a person. Talmud lomar, cherem min ha'adam lo yipadeh. But the Torah says, okay, the dedication regarding a person cannot be redeemed. Ve'ein li ela mitot chamurot. But that seems to apply rather only to more stringent death penalties. Shelo nitna shegigatan lekapara. That even their inadvertent act is not allowable for atonement. Mitot kalot, but lesser death penalties, shenitna shegigatan lekapara, where the inadvertent act, okay, is allowable for atonement. Minayan, how do we know this? Talmud lomar, kol cherem. The Torah teaches all active dedication. Lo mimele, okay, milo tikhu kofer, okay, not mimela, not in general, that one doesn't take this ransom. Shamat mina, that we learn from this, namely lo tishkol mamona mine vatif tare, that one doesn't take the money, okay, and then exempt the person. So therefore, kol cherem lamali. Why then do we say all examples of dedication? Amar Rami Bar Chama itztarich. He says, Rami Bar Chama, it was necessary. And we'll just go over a tiny bit. Salka da'atcha amina. It's possible what I'm saying, therefore, is hani mili hecha dahargo derech aliyah. Okay, maybe it's a situation where this occurred, where he killed him, he committed the murder by an upward movement. Shelo nitna shigigato lechapara. Whereas in that case, we see his inadvertent act is not given for atonement. Aval hargu derech yerida, but if he killed him with the act of the a downward movement, okay, that might be okay. Well, it could be less intentional. All right. Shigigatola kapara, ava hargulo l'derech yirida, did nitna shigigatola kapara, that there the act is given to possible inadvertently to atonement. Ema nishkol mamona mine v'niftara. We might have thought there that we would take the money and exempt him. Kamash Malan comes to teach us that's not the case. And that's where we're going to stop. So in a downward act, okay, maybe he, our classic example, again, maybe he was, chopping wood and the axe blade fell off and hit somebody and killed him, okay? So that certainly is a shogeg situation. And as a result, could we say that he should be exempt totally by paying money? No, he still caused the death.
Right, but he pays money or he goes to our Mikvah.
No, there he would go to Arei Mikvah.
100%.
Accidental.
Right.
If it was an upward situation,
Oh.
he doesn't go to Arei Mikvah. The question is, does he pay?
No, there he could.
He's
If it was,
potter.
why would he be pater if it was an upward situation?
Right, so
Oh,
you
so-
don't pay for it upward to go to Arei Mikvah.
I'm not sure. I'm wondering
100%.
what if it was
If
an
the guy is going up a ladder.
Yeah.
Okay, he's going up a ladder.
Yeah.
And he
falls off the ladder and lands on a person and kills him.
he doesn't go to Arei Mikvah.
That's a downward situation.
But he was going up, he wasn't going down at that time.
But the death occurred down. Down. That's the point.
Death
If I'm
occurred.
going up,
I hear you.
No, but
if I'm going up, he does not go to Arei Mikvah.
So what would you say his punishment would be?
There is no punishment, he's puppet.
I can't see that he would be punished.
Let's go over them all, find out.
When we get this in head,